Kurt has built a lot of different programs to help sales and marketing teams become stronger in using social tools to leverage and gain more business. But really, he has a 30-day package that he's put together, which is really exciting, really great stuff. And he's going to talk about it a little more. I don't want to steal his thunder, but one of the good things is in this webinar today, he's really going to share with us some of the key points and you're going to get some great takeaways as far as what you can do to help build a better social selling culture in your enterprise. And Kurt, thank you very much for joining us. Absolutely.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Carl.
So if you'd like, I'm going to hand the presenting over to you, but before that, maybe give another little introduction, add anything that I didn't.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about that a little bit in the presentation itself when I kind of give folks my background, which will give them some understanding of the perspective that I'm taking to this area of social business.
Excellent, excellent. Well, here you go. Controls are yours.
Today I'm going to be talking then about building a social selling culture within your organization. And I've subtitled this, Turning Bottoms-Up Tactics into Top-Down Strategies. And that's because social is inherently a very personal thing, and for that reason sales reps have really been jumped into it without a lot of direction necessarily from a strategic standpoint. So that's really the focus for this. We're going to be talking first about sales history. No, that's not a picture of me in 1989 with the big brick phone, but hold tight, you will see a picture of me in 1989 with about the same haircut as this guy. But we're going to start out talking about sales history, and then specifically what are the 3 steps to actually building a social selling culture. So let's keep moving. So the first thing that I want to do is just ask people for a little feedback, not so much as a poll, but just kind of a feedback in terms of what's your role. If you can just go down into the chat area and just let us know what's your kind of role in an organization. And I'm going to give you a couple of choices here. Are you in the marketing department? Are you in sales management or sales leadership? Are you a frontline salesperson? Are you an other, which might be a sole proprietor or in a different area of a company? So if you can just give us a little feedback on the chat, that may help us guide things a little bit as we decide which areas we're going to zero in on. So you'll do that in your GoToMeeting control panel just by going down to the chat area and typing us in something. And we can follow along with that as we go. So I'll just keep moving. All right, here's the setup for it. This was actually about now a year and a half ago. Forbes had a magazine cover, Social Power in the Coming Corporate Revolution. And the whole point of that is what Mark Benioff at Salesforce.com described as the social divide. And the social divide is really a function of the fact that, you know what, everybody is social these days. I mean, social has probably been around at least 10 years, right? LinkedIn started 10 years ago this year, Facebook about 6 months later. So some of the big giants in the social space, about 10 years now. And we all adapted to that because things are generally free and they're easy to do. We tended to gravitate towards it as individuals and in our personal life. And that is probably 3 to 5 years ahead of actually being able to pull this into our organizations, institutionalize it, and put some strategies around it. So that's really what we're dealing with here is the rapid adoption by individuals, whether they're consumers or employees, to use these tools. And then, well, how the heck are we going to use it within our companies? That's what we're talking about today. So, if we think of the first companies or the first departments within a company to gravitate towards these, thousands of social apps, really the first company, the first department within a corporation to figure out, hey, there's something to this social thing, was the marketing department. Because marketing is all about getting a message to an audience. And when they saw audiences starting to form around these various social networks and social applications, they figured out, hey, this would be great. And the early ways of looking at it was just, hey, it's another audience I can broadcast material to. So, looking at it the same way that they did a Super Bowl ad, a billboard, or a magazine ad. It's right. It's a new audience for me to pump information out to. And so that's really why marketing in most organizations kind of has the lead when you think of social media. They've been at it, anywhere from maybe 7 to 3 years, depending on when they started. And a lot of that kind of revolved around, listening to the social web and trying to pick up how are people talking about my brand and different areas and things like that. So I'm kind of setting the stage here again of the history, and then we're going to talk about sales history, and then we're going to get into the 1, 2, 3. So again, we're moving through this. 5, 6 years ago, marketing gets glued to it, and they become the leaders, social media for the organization. Now, the next group that kind of get dialed into it, and this is probably starts to really pick up steam 4 to 5 years ago, maybe, and that was customer service, right? Kind of sitting in between marketing and sales a little bit. So customer service realizes, hey, wow, there's a lot of conversations going on out there. So again, where they're talking about their brand, or they're complaining about service of the airline, or particular product liabilities or warranties and things like that, they realized this was a great way we could get feedback from people, we can get new ideas on products, we can capture great experiences and turn those into testimonials, or maybe turn around complaints that people have about our products. So the second department in a lot of evolutions of social recognition and utilization in an organization was customer service. Well, then we get to our poor old sales department, right? Being a 30-year sales guy, obviously I have affinity for that. Now, this is still not me in 1989. Hold on. But the real interesting thing for me when you look at the social phenomena in sales is there's really kind of this split between two worlds. So one world that is over on the left-hand side, that pillar salespeople are very comfortable with, right, have been doing since the beginning of time, since the first caveman sold a wheel to the other caveman. That's the proactive selling part of it. And again, if you think of, getting a list, whether it was a telephone book or, an output from Dun & Bradstreet or something, people are pretty used to this idea of prospecting a list. That's great. What salespeople are not so skilled at is creating content, that half of the social selling equation where they actually are sharing information, presenting themselves as trusted advisors and subject matter experts. Again, some of the better salespeople have done that for a long time, but the tools and technology have not been such to give you the ability to do it on such huge, massive scale. And so that's really kind of the new element of it. And this also opens the door for a heightened level of cooperation between sales and marketing. I think the social phenomena is the greatest opportunity for marketing and sales to finally really work together. And the reason for that is, again, salespeople are not skilled, but if you look at on the content creation part, by and large, right, they generally got leads from marketing, and their job was to close those leads. Marketing is usually the department that is staffed, trained, and in some cases even authorized, or only ones authorized to create certain messages on behalf of the company. So here's the real trick and the competitive advantage. If marketing can assist in supplying those messages, then the sales team's social network actually becomes the most trusted distribution mechanism for that content, because it's way better, again, than taking out an ad or posting a commercial or putting something in a trade journal or even posting something on the website. Because when a salesperson shares that content with somebody in their network, it is wrapped in the wrapper of trust because they have a personal relationship. So that's really what we're getting at here. So let's scale this down, look at it a slightly different way. If we look at social business, this big general term social business that the magazine article was heightening, I'm going to narrow down the scope here for our discussion. And again, we're really just talking primarily about social selling now. Throughout the rest of the BrandChats social business webinar series, you're going to get a lot of different inputs and perspectives on all these areas that will round out social business. But I'm a sales guy, and I'm really just focused on the social selling piece of it. And for today's talk, we're really just going to focus mostly on one half of the social selling discussion, which is the external half. So let's talk about the part we're not talk about. So let's briefly talk about the part we're not going to talk about. That's the internal part of social selling. So I just put up there some of the popular applications that are used for internal social communication. And absolutely, these have a very large play in building a social selling culture. We just had to limit the scope of this conversation a little bit so that it didn't become too great. And so if you look at tools like Jive, Chatter, Yammer, and there's many others, these are great ways to internally share that message. As you have distributed sales forces, more and more, right, people don't even have regional offices anymore. Everybody's working out of their home. office, that type of thing. So having a social network where people can share information about, hey, this was a new conversion technique I had, or I got this objection, how has somebody handled it in the past, or this new competitive thing on the horizon, what are we going to do about it? That stuff is all great to really accelerate, facilitate, and enhance the internal discussions. We're going to focus on the external, right, outward market-facing applications, salespeople generally out into the market to their prospects. Now, if we start rolling out some of the applications and tools in this space, certainly in the business-to-business space, LinkedIn is the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to social selling into the business-to-business space. You know, Twitter, in my opinion, Twitter is a very distant second, and a little bit more graduated level of sophistication for most instances. So when I'm working with clients, I typically recommend, hey, let's master the main one first, and then we can graduate into using Twitter. And then we've got, the thousands of other applications in there. Now, certainly Facebook warrants a discussion here. It's a big giant. It's got the most users of anyone. Again, it's just my focus and the focus, I think, for most people looking at the BrandChats webinar series is going to be in the B2B space. And Facebook is just not such a big player in the B2B space, right? Yes, I'll take on all arguments and detractors and everything else, but hey, it was started as a way for college kids to hook up, and it's great for perhaps big consumer brands going right to consumer marketing, and that all plays. But if it's a business you just got to pick your tools and find out what space you're in. All right, so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's keep going. So one of the most well-known examples when people say, what are actual real results? Who's getting real results for this? Gang, this article from a pilot study that IBM did is now a year old. And you don't need to bother to read all the details of this article. You can just go Google IBM social selling if you want to get the whole article, or send me an email, and I'll send you the link. The point I want to make here, and I just netted it out for you in terms of what's the punchline. So the punchline is that IBM, who's clearly one of the thought leaders in utilizing social selling techniques. So IBM did a pilot around some of their cloud-based services, and they picked a small team and set about using Twitter and LinkedIn quite a bit to both listen and provide information as subject matter experts in that. So they weren't even really out and out prospecting per se, but they were just being active on the social web in this pilot. And the result was they had a 400% sales increase compared to other techniques which we were doing previously, which weren't using some of these social applications. And so they were encouraged enough by that result that they declared that they were going to roll this out to all 1,700 inside salespeople. And again, that was over a year ago, so they're obviously now well on their way to utilizing these social selling techniques in their sales. So that's a pretty well-known study, and again, 400% sales increase, that's not too bad. A lot of this comes to do with, again, just being engaged in the social web and having people go. Now, one of the great things about social media is it can turn everybody into a worldwide publisher, right? So I've got another poll. This is actually a question. I guess we should really call this a pop quiz. And what I want you guys to do, again, you can just use the chat field to write in your answer to this. And let's just see what kind of answers that we get in the chat field. So the question would be, so IBM has about 40,000 employees. I want you guys to type in how many of those employees do you think actually publish onto the social web on behalf of IBM? All right, so give me a number. I want a number between 1 and 40,000. How many IBM employees do you think publish onto the social web on behalf of IBM? Okay, I'm seeing numbers here like 14,000, 5,000, 15,000, 40,000. No, it's not. I can tell you it's not 40,000. Not every single person does.
You got a couple that came directly to me privately. I got a 50 and I got a 125.
50,000 or 50?
50. I got a 50 and I got 125.
All right. So the answer is 36,000. Isn't that amazing? 36,000 people at IBM publish into the social web on behalf of the company. That is a socially engaged business, gang. I mean, imagine the content that's getting pumped out in the various areas. And so when you think of your own business, right, it's not just sales and it's not just marketing that can benefit your company in this area. I mean, there's areas of expertise all throughout, you know, engineering, R&D, accounting, HR. I mean, let's just take something that seemingly doesn't seem to really be on the radar, HR. Why the heck is HR going to be doing it? Why? Because HR is trying to attract quality people to IBM. So they're not talking about cloud-based servers and security and WebSphere and stuff like that. They're talking about what a great place it is and all these employee development programs they have and what fantastic benefits they are and how the career paths are in IBM. So everybody's got, you know, sort of an agenda to promote. Everybody, meaning all the various departments, have agendas to promote. And so by totally engaging in the social sphere, because that's how people get information and share information these days, gang, we're not going to fight it. So I think that's just an amazing statistic that I like to share with people. So let's keep moving forward. So now we're going to be talking about the stages of sales technology adoption. So hopefully we've got, you know, a few people on here that have been out of college more than 2 or 3 years, like me. So I've been out in the sales business. Wow, this is my 30-year anniversary, actually, from graduation. And so we're going to take a little trip down memory lane here. Things first start out. This is how all sales technology works out, or a lot of sales technology works out, right? It starts out with every rep for themselves. Why? Salespeople are incredibly resourceful people. And, right, they don't all necessarily wait for the company to agree to something or roll something out or institutionalize it. They just want to go and grab it because they want to sell something and increase their income. That's what makes great salespeople good. So they just jump into it. It's an every rep for themselves scenario. Now, if enough people do that, then they start to get the attention of management. They say, you know what, maybe we should put some, formalize this a little bit. And, you know, we see some of our reps really making a lot of sales using this. Maybe we should train everybody how to do it. So there gets to be a little formality and strategy around that. The last tip of this technology adoption is when that actually becomes so formalized that management says, you know what, we actually need some systems around this now so that we can manage it. We want to be able to track key performance indicators. We want managers to have a dashboard on this stuff, right? We need to know how we're doing because otherwise we can't manage it, right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so the highest tier of this would be that formal state actually results in systems of things that can be managed and tracked, right? Imagine if your accounting system didn't have a system to track it and figure out your profit and loss each month. So this is what's going on, the same thing in the sales arena. So this is where I'm going to ask you guys to drop back into the world of history a little bit. And we're going to compare social selling and rolling that out as a culture. We're going to compare that to something that I'm sure most people are pretty familiar with, and that is CRM, Customer Relationship Management. So let's go back about 30 years and think about sales reps running around, right? They may have still had a Rolodex at that point, which is a way of keeping track of their contacts. But then the savvy ones realized, hey, you know what? I've got my little personal computer here, you know, and you started to discover software programs like ACT, one of the first contact managers. Some people may be familiar with that. And so that was kind of really popular. And if we put a decade out, we're talking about the 80s. And then if we get up into the 90s, things started to get a little bit more sophisticated in the CRM space. We started to see things like Goldmine and Sales Logics and some of those other things that were, you know, client-server-based architectures. But the big difference there was they started to get networked within the company so the company could see information. We started to get into more strategy and formal training in the CRM world in the 90s. When we come up into this century and we get kind of into the 2000s, then we start to look at, you know, cloud-based systems. Certainly Salesforce would be one of the most recognized ones there, but there's certainly, you know, other popular cloud-based solutions from Oracle and SAP and Sugar and NetSuite, many other guys in that space. But just represented here is the point that the big key there is, I think, is the word dashboard. So it really became important for management to have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in terms of forecasting and opportunities. So that's where the idea of a management dashboard became really popular, right? So we're going to kind of look at now what's happening in the social space. Well, gang, guess what? We come back up to 2013, we are really back down here to square one where it's every rep for themselves in most cases at companies. And you know what? It's even easier to understand why in the case of most social applications because you had to pay money to get ACT. I mean, a lot of these things, LinkedIn, Twitter, and probably about half of the 1,000 applications that are represented there, they are just free. And again, so it's easy for sales reps to pick it up and start figuring out how to use it. But very few companies have kind of made that leap into the strategy and formal training, and even a smaller percentage actually have systems to manage it. That's what we're going to be talking about for the next few minutes. That's the gist of this presentation. Here's a comment that I typically get when I go in and talk to a sales leader about helping them get new business by leveraging social selling. And again, in the B2B space, social selling usually quickly flips over into how well people use LinkedIn. And this is what I usually hear from a sales executive, right? Oh, all our people have LinkedIn. Well, just having it doesn't mean they know how to use it, right? Because in just about every case, I can go look at the LinkedIn profiles of their sales reps, and I just jump to things like how many connections do they have. Well, I can tell you when a senior account manager, a territory manager, a regional manager, or a independent software developer, sales manager, when they have less than 100 connections, chances are very slim that they are actually getting business out of LinkedIn, right? I mean, that's probably just the passive people that they've accepted connection to. That really doesn't show that people are working a network and getting business out of LinkedIn. So a lot of times in the executives' understanding of where their sales team is greatly overrated compared to where they actually are. So we go in and start talking about things. And hey, here's where we get to the picture of me in 1989. Like I told you, I have the same hairdo as that guy in the first picture. So I'm giving you guys a little background into my background just so you can understand my perspective and why I kind of keep tying this back a lot to CRM as a sales adoption issue. As Carl said, I had about almost 15 years as a tech sales rep and then about 10 years as a sales executive. My last role was a VP of sales for a software company. And when I was there, when I was brought in, one of the things I was brought in to do was to kind of turbocharge, accelerate a lot of the sales there. And so I converted that company from Excel-based tracking system, right, into a true CRM system where I was the customer for Salesforce.com and I was the executive sponsor, lead person bringing in Salesforce.com and rolling that out into the company. When I launched my own business about 5 years ago, I actually started out doing a lot from that experience. I started out doing a lot of Salesforce implementation because as I would come in and help companies grow their sales, the first thing I would always say is, what's your CRM system? And they either did not have one, in which case I helped them implement it, or in 2 cases they actually had a Salesforce system implementation, which was extremely dormant, not adopted, not really used very much, not integrated into their real selling process. So over the course of about 4 years, I actually led the implementation, 1 as a customer and 4 as a consultant. Over the course of 4 years, I led the implementation of 5 CRM systems. And that experience taught me how to implement a technology and get a sales force to actually use it. And I sort of describe it this way in terms of degree of difficulty. Let's compare it to a couple of things. If you think of one end as being, the Staples easy button here, and the other end as being rocket science, then I liken CRM to being way over there on the right side, close to rocket science, right? There's a lot of technology that typically goes into a CRM implementation. You got to find the data in the old system, purge it out, clean it, import it back in. Sometimes you're merging various systems together. You've got to hook that into the back end of your accounting system or ERP system, make sure all that stuff works so you can do this closed loop from lead to closed revenue. There's a lot of technology involved there, and you get database guys and IT guys and everything else involved. But I always used to say, a successful CRM implementation, it's 90% people and adoption, it's 10% technology. Now, when we come back and look at social selling, a lot of people mistakenly think social selling is really easy. It's down here on the left-hand side of the scale. And again, part of the reason is because, oh, well, it's free and everybody's had a LinkedIn account or a Twitter account or something like that. They've had it for years and it's free and they've been using it, so everybody must know how to use it. Well, maybe they do individually, but not institutionalized as a corporate advantage. And so when you want to get into that space and you drive, consistency and higher levels and skills training, on a corporate level, social selling really starts to move up closer to CRM. And again, it goes back to the fact that 90% of it is people adoption. Only 10% of it is technology. So while there's very little technology integration in most instances for some of the social selling tools into the other corporate tools, at least today, The people part of it is still the toughest part of it. So that's what we're going to be talking about in our 3 steps. So the 3 steps for building a social selling culture are probably the same generic 3 steps for doing a lot of cultural change. And the first one is you got to set your goals. We're going to break down each one of these. You got to set your goals. You got to train people for what's going on, and then you got to come back in and manage it. So we're going to look at all 3 of those as we step forward. Before we get to step 1, I'm actually going to start with step 0, though, and that is who are the players that are typically involved in a social selling implementation within an organization. And you know, if you're in a large organization, these are all going to be pretty discrete roles. If you're in a smaller organization, you may have some people that are playing multiple roles, wearing multiple hats. But you'll see each of these roles as being needed at different stages in building a social selling culture. And I've kind of used some, just for fun, I've used some kind of archetype characters from the movies or TVs in these different roles. So the first role that we've got here is VP of Sales. And the VP of Sales is going to help establish those goals up front and provide the executive support, right? Yes, this is important to us. We're paying attention. Do it. That's what the VP of Sales is going to add to the equation. Then we get the VP of Marketing on board, right? They need to be in on the planning team. And remember, the reason that is because the content is a huge part of social engagement. And the VP of Marketing is the person that controls the creation of content in a company. So they need to be on board with this project from the get-go. The next person we're going to talk about is the salesperson, right? So we need a leading salesperson, an enthusiastic top rep, a leader, a person that's hitting their numbers and is already drinking the Kool-Aid in terms of social adoption. So they're using it right now to drive sales, and they're respected by their peers. They're going to look up to what they're doing. We also need sales management on board, right? Because in terms of reinforcement of any kind of a culture, sales management is really key that they start using this vocabulary. They start asking about these things when they're having account reviews with salespeople. So when they're trying to crack a big account or asking where that forecast is, they need to say, you know, hey, have you looked at their LinkedIn account? How many people do you have common connections to? Have you tried to leverage them for introductions, right? All those types of things are important. Then you've also got the people that are going to manage the back end, the sales ops person that's going to handle the communication to the field, to keep people reminding. It's going to help communicate, share success stories, handle obstacles, collect that information, report it up to management, do the measurement and tracking of it. That's what sales ops is going to have. And then it's always nice, if you're trying to implement a big change, you need to have that cheerleader, the people that everybody just looks to as being a real leader and a change agent coming in. That's where you need that evangelist. So these are some of the players that you might have. And again, that can be lumped into multiple people or a single person playing multiple roles, but that's sort of where we are in players. So let's get on to the goals now. If we want to start on the most simplistic level, the goal of any sales training or sales change initiative should be greater sales, right? So we could start with that as a simplistic level. I always just like to put a caveat around it, though, to say, while that's very desirable to say that we want our social selling to drive more sales, and it may and it will eventually, depending on the length of your sales cycle, depending on how many variables affect sales, it's tough to sometimes draw that direct line, right? Because social selling is not necessarily going to dictate how well are your people at qualifying and presenting and negotiating and closing. It doesn't affect how your product is competitive in the market. It doesn't affect the overall economy, right? All these things that could impact your sales, social selling doesn't impact. So while it's nice to think that you can just draw a direct line to sales, there's so many other variables, that's a tough one to just directly track. Now, appointments, on the other hand, is something that you can very clearly track a lot of times right back to your social selling initiatives, and that's a hard metric. It's obviously the beginning of the sales cycle, but if you would say everything stays consistent in terms of your closing ratio once you got initial contact, and you can measure the number of new appointments that social selling gets, then you can pretty much ascribe the benefits of it. Then if we branch off into kind of a newer area, you have this whole area of social influence. And some of the big scores or companies that are providing these social influence scores are things like Clout and Cred and Peer Index, if you're kind of in the space and you know about those. When you look at the social selling space, you look at really B2B sellers and influencers, to me it's still a little bit jury is out in terms of if those are really great measures of a seller's social influence. Again, some of them kind of bleed over into more of a brand thing. Some of them bleed over into more of a thought leader, blogger, influencer kind of a role. So I think these will either continue to refine, or you'll see some specifically that are more designed to measure sales influence, but you get kind of the point. These are the areas. And then we could drill all the way down into, again, specific, pretty measurable type things that are specific to social selling. So whereas appointments are kind of a classical sales metric that would typically be tracked in a CRM system, the things down at the bottom there are really more socially oriented metrics that we'll talk about here in just a minute. Here's just one example of a metric that one client that was in the insurance business wanted to track, and that is, while they were certainly looking at prospects and building up more prospects in their network, what they really wanted to focus on as a strategic initiative for the company was getting more referral sources, because they were calling on CFOs and CEOs of businesses. They knew that what they call the ABCs, attorneys, bankers, and CPAs, also call on those exact people, have long-term trusted relationships with these people. So the commercial insurance people that I was working with, selling property casualty and employee benefits, wanted to build, management wanted to build up, wanted all the salespeople to build up their network among this particular three industries, and so that was a specific metric that was tracked and measured for the progress of this pilot. So what I want to ask you guys is, again, let's just go fingers to keyboard, get a little feedback from you guys in the chat window. Tell me, what do you think would be a good metric to measure the success of a social selling program? Right? Do you want to go really high and broad and look at sales? Again, if you have a very long sales cycle, I think we mentioned there may be some aviation executives on the webinar here, and I'm not sure what area of aviation you're in, but if you're selling planes, that's probably a pretty long sales cycle. So if if that was a 12-month sales cycle, then it's going to be a very long time to measure that. Versus if you want to measure appointments, that's going to be a much shorter term to wins and being able to find the success of this program. So type in, what do you think would be, in your business, what do you think would be a good metric to track? Do you want to track the growth of your salespeople's social network? Do you want to track the number of introductions that they get through LinkedIn? Do you want to track their social activity, how many times they post updates, or how many times people respond to something that they track? What would you want to track in your social selling pilot? So give me just a second. If I see any pop up, I'll share those. And Carla, if you get any that are directly sent to you, you can do that. I'll give people just a couple seconds to think about what would my metrics be in a social selling program. If we got any, I see things like some things we've mentioned. Appointments seems to be a popular one. So let's move on to part number 2, talking about training. So in the training arena, I always use the example, again, if we're going to stay zeroed in here on LinkedIn just for a minute. So I always use the example of looking at a health club membership. And I say, hey, look, just having a LinkedIn account, remember like that sales executive said to me, and we saw people, he said, everybody has a LinkedIn account, right, but they have 23 connections. So my point is, having a LinkedIn account is like having a health club membership card in your wallet, right? It doesn't do you much good if you don't know how the stuff works and you actually use it. So here's another way of thinking about it, right? If you're going to build those big social selling muscles, you need 2 things. You need the knowledge of how the stuff works, right? But more importantly, you need the discipline to do it on a regular basis, because if you can combine the how-to knowledge with the discipline to actually do the how-to knowledge, that's when you're going to build the muscles. That's when you're going to see the results from a program like this. So what are your options? How can you get training on social selling? We can first look at what are the different elements that go into it. You can really simplify it to these 4 components. Right? The first thing is you need to have a professional profile, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. If you're in a particular social network that might be particular to your vertical industry, you need to have a professional profile. It's got the right keywords, a professional photograph, the right headlines, all the kind of descriptors. It's going to look good when somebody comes and looks at you. Then you need to build your audience. That's your social network. On LinkedIn, that would be your level 1 connections. But you need to build an audience that's going to help drive those referrals, introductions, people that are going to absorb and pay recognition to your social postings. Then you need to listen to your community, right? It's the old adage, the reason we have 1 mouth and 2 ears is we need to use them in that ratio. So before you jump in and start weighing in with posts, you need to listen to groups and communities and find out what's the etiquette, what are people interested in, what's the format people are using to exchange it. Then once all that's in order, then you're ready to engage and jump in and have discussions in your social community. So when you're looking at these options, the one thing I always like to tell people is it takes time. You're not going to learn this in a 3-hour session at the sales meeting. It's not going to happen, right? They need not only to learn new skills, and your people need to absorb them, but you need to read the room. That's the listening part of it, right? And you need time for a network to respond to you. This is a dialogue. It's an exchange back and forth, whether you're inviting people to connect with your network or comment on a posting that you made or answer a question. A network needs to respond, and again, that doesn't happen in one 3-hour session. So you're typically talking, I mean, realistically, you're talking the calendar we have there, 30, 60, 90 days or more to kind of really get people up to speed in this new adoption habit and see it paying off in results. So what are the different ways you can go about it that I've seen companies do? Well, option one is you can have, the marketing intern who's a social media whiz come in. And this person is usually 23 years old, a year out of college, a digital native, grew up, using Facebook in junior high school, and absolutely knows everything all about the technology from a very consumer standpoint. Typically, the drawback is that they usually don't have a lot of business skills. They've never carried a sales bag in their life, so they don't necessarily have the context to put a lot of the just selling skills about rapport and when to use this, the art of selling. They don't have that kind of background to them, so that has to be played into it. And also a skeptical sales audience sometimes doesn't quite give this person the credibility from a training perspective. The next option would be just go ahead and draft that socially savvy top sales rep that we mentioned should be on the sales routine anyway. When they're using all these tools now to generate tons of business, why not draft them? And it's a great idea. They're certainly going to know the business and the applications of it better than anybody here. The drawback is, of course, if that person's producing a lot of revenue now, you want to take them out of the field for a couple of months to develop the training curriculums and the PowerPoints and the exercises and the tests and the cheat sheets and the workbooks and all that type of. Your next option, of course, is you can look at a traditional sales training program. I'm talking about, like methodology kind of sales training programs, and, I kind of use the aggregated Miller Spin-centric term here. And again, they're going to have a lot of insight into the actual selling techniques and things like that. You just have to really look into, do they know about the new selling techniques that are implied in social selling? And then obviously choice 4 is to use somebody like me or somebody else that specifically specializes in social selling, and you're probably just going to find that from a Google search. So those are some of the options there. Now, the next question a lot of times sales leaders ask is, hey, you know what, this sounds great. Social selling is a huge thing. I really want to do something, but I didn't have it in my 2013 budget, so how am I going to pay for this? Here are some of the options people have used. One is, hey, take the money from other budgets. A lot of times what I see people doing is sales leaders more and more are focused on short-term results, right? They got to hit a number for that month or for that quarter, and they're not necessarily, and some of them are abandoning some of the sort of longer-term sales methodology, cultural changes that many times take like over a year to kind of all the way seep through. So if they take money from those longer-term, more expensive initiatives, they can get a kind of a quicker hit by doing some social selling here and getting the appointments up and closing more deals. So that's one option. All other industries I've seen, they just let their reps know about it and they let them pay for it out of their own wallet. So myself and a number of other companies offer public or open enrollment courses along with the private courses we do for companies. And sometimes the sales manager will just say, you know what, we don't have enough budget now, but if you want to go do it to pad your own commissions, you can go ahead and do that. And they had one company that said, I'll tell you what, you pay for it out of your own wallet at first, and if you pass a certification test at the end of this, then I'll come back and let you reimburse it. He had the comment, I thought it was just a great comment. He said, I don't mind paying money, I don't mind spending money, I just hate wasting money. So I don't want to, spend money to send all my people through this program if, only some percentage of them are actually going to embrace it. So this was how he handled it. Another company actually looked at it and they said, oh, LinkedIn, that's kind of a career development thing, and they were able to actually go over and tap some existing career development funds through the HR department to get their salespeople more skilled using LinkedIn. So that was kind of a creative way. And then I have some clients that are actually resellers, integrators, and things like that for other large companies like IT people like Cisco and company HP and companies like that. So they have co-op funds available at their discretion, and they've used that to pay for training. So those options, some of those may apply to you. So the last area we're going to talk about here is management, the all-important piece, management. So we got people trained, now we need to come in and do management. So I'm going to show you just one example. And first I'm going to start off with just a reminder of how LinkedIn network works, because the number of connections is a real good indicator of how up to speed people are on using LinkedIn. So if we look at this one client, we can see in his LinkedIn level 1, which would be his Rolodex or LinkedIn address book, he had 535 connections that he was directly connected to. Now, where the number gets interesting is really looking at his level 2. So the people that his network is connected to yields 318,000 people. And I tell people, don't get all excited about the 10 million people in level 3, because that's actually hard to reach. But the 300,000 people in level 2 is absolutely where they're going to find a lot of business, because they can get a personal referral into people in level 2 from the level 1 connections, right? So that's where you're going to get the personal referrals out of a huge pool of 318,000 people. So I wanted to put that in context, because the next slide here is just one particular metric that you can use to manage success in a LinkedIn initiative. What you're seeing on this chart is that it's actually showing it's 2 series of numbers showing the number of LinkedIn connections for a sales team of about 35 people. So the row in the foreground, which is mostly the red bars, is the number of connections the sales team had before a 60-day LinkedIn training program. And the number in the back are the number of LinkedIn connections that those same people had 60 days after the training began. Way over on the left-hand side, we can see that the targeted number of connections for a full-time business-to-business sales hunter was 400. Those are the blue bars. And way over on the right-hand side, we see the averages. So before the training started, there were 235 average number of connections. And by the end of the program, you can see they had reached the goal just over 400 connections, 407. And if they're red, that means they're below the threshold. If they're green, that means they're above the goal. So you can see tremendous success made there. But let's net this out and answer the question, so what? Okay, so the so what for this particular group is that just across these 35 people, this group increased their level 1 connections by almost 6,000 people within a 60-day period. And that translates to a level 2 increase of over 1 million people. And level 3, you're talking like tens of millions of people. So the point of this is that this company increased its social footprint, where they could get influence by tens of millions of people simply by having all 35 people increase their network by an average of 200 level 1 connections. Right? That is tremendous power. Now it's time for marketing to help out with the content, and you're really raising the visibility of that company. Another way you can track things, obviously, is in your CRM system. You can simply put, how did people respond? You can put in some social metrics like they replied to a tweet, or I got a LinkedIn update, or things like that. And there's actually tools that are available now which are allowing companies to roll up or get aggregate dashboard views of people that are working in their individual LinkedIn accounts. So you can see in aggregate how many of our people, how many have grown the network of, in the case of the insurance company, how many more attorneys do we have now in our network? How many more CPAs do we have in our network? How many VPs of manufacturing of pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey do we now have in our network, right? So these are all tools that are available as you get to that most sophisticated level of tracking your management. Again, to implement a social selling culture, it's really a 3-phase process. Determine what your goals are, pick one of the methods to train those people, reinforce that through sales management, and then come back and continue to manage it as you put systems in place to do it. So wrapping things up, I always like to give people kind of a fun little resource to do. I have something on my website that's called the Personal LinkedIn Score. It's a 10-question survey. You can knock it out in about 2 minutes, but it's going to give you a score between 0 and 100. So if you just go to the salesfoundry.com/score/, you can actually find it there and do that little 2-minute quiz, and you'll get a score on your own LinkedIn selling status from 0 to 100. It's kind of fun to serve as a baseline. As you start to build up more capabilities, you can watch that number grow. With that, I'm just going to wrap up. I'll put my contact information up here and just pass it back to Carl to see if we've got any questions and give it to him for the wrap-up.
I actually want to open up the floor for questions, but while I did it, I wanted to show you guys something, because Kurt shares some amazing information about LinkedIn. And I just want to share with you that I've been on LinkedIn for about 9 years, and I have over 6,000 connections. These connections have provided unbelievable value throughout my tenure as a sales consultant and leading companies like BrandChats into the U.S. If you look, you can see under my LinkedIn network in the bottom right corner, I have 6,111 connections, which gives me a link to 20 million people. These 20 million people include some pretty impressive names. I'm just going to throw one out there. Let's just say Jack Welch, former CEO of GE. And if you look right here, he's a second-degree connection, which means I can literally pass a note to Jack Welch, one of my first-degree connections. Think about the power here. If you build a strong enough network, you can get in touch with all of the leaders of industry that you want to engage with as an organization. I'm going to pass it back to you, Kurt. I just wanted to show them that real quick, and then we'll see if we get any questions. Hang on just a sec.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. That's a great testimonial for the power of LinkedIn, and yeah, it's just it's so powerful as a selling tool. And you know, they're coming up on in May. They will have been 2 years as a public company, which obviously brought a lot of money for feature development and also a lot of pressure to deliver on things. So in the last year and a half, they have rolled out so many incredible features that even though I spend probably 50 or 60 hours a week living on LinkedIn and training on LinkedIn, you know, it's even hard for me to keep up with. So the features on it are just absolutely incredible. And you know, that's why typically it's going to take people 30 to 60 days to kind of really learn how to leverage it.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because I've obviously been using LinkedIn a long time. I didn't even realize they've been around 10 years until I got a message from them. I think it was in December, maybe it was in January. It said, "Congratulations, you've been on LinkedIn for 9 years." And
you beat me by a year. You were really an early adopter.
I pretty much the day they announced in the Bay Area that they were live to users, I joined LinkedIn. I think the year before that they were in beta, and you could get in if you were on beta, but I wasn't.
Yeah, that sounds exactly right, because I was like number 2 million. I was like member number 2 million in 2005, and so you would have been in 2004. They started in 2003, so you would have been in 2004.
Sub 500,000. I know.
Oh, yeah, you are really early then. Yeah, you're really early.
It looks like we've got a question. Let's see here. These are all coming to me privately, so I'm just going to share it with you, and then you can respond. We've got one here. I'm not going to say your name. I hope you don't mind. I'm not going to say names when people ask questions. Any recommendations on how to cultivate the LinkedIn contacts? I've added people, I've met at conventions, but haven't followed up with them. I'd like to find an excuse to contact every now and then without a hard ask. You want to field this?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You know, one of the things I like to use is LinkedIn will, when you go look at your address book, LinkedIn automatically categorizes people certain ways. So it's kind of an easy way for you to segment people that might be in a particular industry or a particular town or at a particular company. So that allows you to segment your address book or level 1 into smaller groups. So you can sometimes you know, send them a direct message which says, if you had people that were in the hospitality industry, like, hey, I just read this great article about, you know, meeting planners I thought you would be interested in, and you can send it to them that way. So, but you have a lot of different ways to communicate with people. You can. It sounds like the question is sort of leaning toward sending them direct messages. So you can do that individually. Obviously, if they're your level 1, you can send them individual messages, which is very personal but very laborious, one by one. You can send them sort of like a group mass email type thing, still out of your address book by grouping them by some method. Or the easiest, I mean the less personal, but the easiest way is just be a frequent poster of information through your LinkedIn updates, because anything you post, your level 1 people, you know, are going to see there in their homepage feed. So again, it's not as direct, but it's kind of that easier. It's a visibility thing, not necessarily a direct connect.
I'd like to add a little something here. One thing that we forget when we start using a business tool like LinkedIn is that inherently the reason you connected with these people was business related, but now you have a way to be personal. I am a big fan when I know that eventually people could be of value to me in a business relationship of building a relatively personal one. And LinkedIn, Facebook, these tools give you, you're saying excuse, but they give you a path and a tool where you can just say, hi, how have you been? What's new? And I love, I'll be honest, I don't read most of the blast emails where someone's announcing something on LinkedIn. And obviously with 6,111 connections, I get a lot of them. But when I get a direct message from someone and they just ask me what's up or how I've been, or am I going to the next show that I met them at before, etc., am I presenting anywhere, when they just start asking about me, I tend to get engaged. And you'd be surprised how many of these personal conversations turn into very strong business relationships where people come to me and say, hey, I just got a new role, or we just rolled out a new product, or I see you're working for so-and-so. And it's not the first message they've sent me. It's the 15th or 20th after we built some discourse over several months. And that's, I would say that excuse is just say hi, ask questions, and learn more about the people at a social level, and it'll lead to business.
Right. Yeah. I mean, right. It's just, like you just said, it's an excuse to connect with people, right? One of the ones I like to mention sometime is the ability to get an introduction through LinkedIn, right, through a common connection, like you just showed for Jack Welch, for example, right? If you wanted to get an introduction to Jack Welch through the common connection that you had, on this same question, the theme we're talking about here, I often say to people that there's actually two advantages to getting an introduction through LinkedIn. One is you get connected to Jack Welch. That's the inherent one, an obvious one. But the other is, whoever's your common connection, Carl, to Jack Welch, you may not have talked to for a year or two.
True, very true. And I haven't.
And so just the fact that you are reaching out to them, hey, would you mind introducing me to your buddy Jack? P.S. Oh, by the way, what are you up to now? I'm really interested, right? Now, you're basically triggering two conversations.
Exactly. And I do that. I do that often. And I'll tell you right now, that was not planned. I just went to my LinkedIn when you mentioned that and thought of the first big name I could. And I thought I might have to do two or three. That was the first one.
It was pretty good.
It was a second-degree connection. But and I'm not going to go back and show you. The person I'm connected to Kim through is a managing director at CSC. And it just triggered in my mind. I haven't talked to this guy in a year or so. I should probably see what he's up to. Right? So literally what you're saying, I went through, I don't need an intro to Jack Welch. I'm going to just ask him how he's been. And really, you'd be surprised what a conversation with the managing director at CSC could turn into, right?
Hey, can I share with you a hot new tip that you just made me think of?
Yes, absolutely. It could be our closing moment.
Okay, so along the lines of LinkedIn continues to add these like new features, and sometimes they don't even tell their top consultants about it. I just discover them. So sometime over the last few months, LinkedIn has rolled out this great new feature, which I've been asking them for a year, which is the ability to search within your level 1 connections. Okay?
Explain that again, please.
Okay, yeah. So you now have the ability to search within your level 1's connections. All right? So the example would be, the thing that triggered it is when you talk about, you have no idea how important a managing director at CSC is. Okay? So in the last couple months, LinkedIn's giving you this ability. If you go to the profile of that managing director at CSC, or if anybody goes to the profile of if you go to a profile of a heavy hitter in your level 1, somebody that you know is well-positioned in network and kind of knows you and likes you, right? You go to their profile and you scroll down to where it says connections. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a little tiny box. It's like you don't even know what it is. There's a little tiny box with the microscope next to it. And that's allowing you to search through. Like, if I wanted to search all 6,000 of your connections, Carl, for VPs of sale, I could do it. And so it gives you the ability to go into somebody that's a level 1 for you.
Oh, wow.
And type in a keyword, because the point is, like, in your case, wouldn't you like the managing director of, a big shot at CSC, wouldn't you like to find all the CMOs that he is connected to?
You know what, though? But this is, it looks like it's only first degree.
It's showing, well, no, it'll show if he's connected to any CMOs.
So I just ran it for CMOs, but it looked like it's only showing me first degree connections of mine.
I will go into detail. I want to make sure we're in the right place.
No, I found it. I'm gonna take a look at this. I'm gonna look at it further. This is amazing. If they're rolling this out, so you can see their second and third, you can see their first degree connections, which would in essence be your secondary connections. That's
correct.
Fantastic. You know what I'm going to do real quick, if you don't mind? I'm going to take the screen back, and I'm going to show this to the few people left on here, because I'm sure they'd like to see it, so bear with me for just a sec. And I'm going to take this exact same.
This can really be a powerful feature.
Oh, this is a big time saver. So let me go in here.
If you're connected to a big wheel, and that person knows you and likes you, this is basically, you're flipping through their black book. This is basically you flipping through their Rolodex.
So anyone watching, here I am in a first-degree connection, right? If I go down and click on that person's connections, here's this little magnifying glass. And I can go in here and search for CMO. And there are the 12 CMOs that we're both connected to.
That you could get a personal introduction to from that guy.
Right. So I'm not sure why my system is only showing first-degree connections right now. It doesn't have any.
Oh no! The reason is every CMO he knows you know.
Right.
put in marketing VP, right? And it'll probably kick back like 72, and there'll be some second levels in there.
Gotcha.
And then you won't. That's the goal for you. So you already know the same people he knows. Type in something like marketing VP.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm going to play with it a little more. I think everyone else should play with it too. That's pretty fantastic. That's a really great tool.
That's gold, baby.
I appreciate you joining us. I hope everyone really enjoyed this. I tried to get a recording of it, so we will see how the recording comes out. And when that's done, I will post a link and send it out to everyone that's interested. Anyone that wants to follow up Kurt directly, feel free. If you want to reach out to me and ask more about Kurt, I will be happy to give you his information. But otherwise, BrandChats is really happy to have hosted you today, and we look forward to seeing the rest of you in our future events. Have a lovely day, everyone, and goodbye.